Massive street protest, police responding with gunfire, shooting people. This isn't in the Ukraine. This is in Venezuela. What is going on in Venezuela? Well, to help us answer that question, our friend Humberto Fontova, who joins us from New Orleans. Humberto, welcome back to the show. You're an expert on matters of Latin American communism and Cuba. And in effect, that's part of the problem here, because Venezuela is basically, and Cuba are a joint allies in authoritarianism, aren't they?
Right. Exactly. Thanks a lot for the invite. As a matter of fact, Venezuela, you can really call Venezuela a Cuban colony right now. Maduro, the Venezuelan chief of state, he can't even go to the toilet without asking Raul Castro's permission first. And what is happening, I think, is that the situation just reaching the tipping point in Venezuelans. Venezuelans have had it up to here, and they're essentially taking it to the streets, primarily because of shortages. It's, as we used to say here during some recent elections, it's the economy, stupid. Well, that's what happens. The shortages in Venezuela, people can't find toilet paper in the stores. Here's a nation that gets $100 billion a year in oil revenue. Supposedly, they've got the world's biggest oil reserves. And Venezuelans can't find corn, flour, or toilet paper in the stores. And I think they realize that there may not be a peaceful or electoral solution to this problem, because every time they go to the polls, the Chavistas steal the election. And then they come into power and they steal the country blind.
Well, that's a great point.
So I think they're basically saying,
we talk a lot on this show about Venezuelan oil exports to the United States. It's about 800,000 barrels a day. When you do the math, that's about $80 million a day. It's tens of billions from the United States alone. You're correct to say that Venezuela, other than Saudi Arabia, and some would even argue it's even more, has the most oil in the world. How can you have so much oil money coming in and such poverty? I mean, I was reading the other day that Venezuela nationalized some, Best Buy type, iPod stores. Just because they're going crazy to blaming business people. The reason why we have shortages because of you business people. We're going to nationalize that. It looks a little bit crazy. What's it like on the streets in Venezuela?
Yeah. Exactly. Everything the Venezuelan government has done basically for the last 10 years, maybe the last 12 years, has been done under the tutelage, if not the direct orders, of the Castro regime in Cuba. They're colonial masters. The only reason a lot of people will tell you that the Castro regime is still afloat is because of the 100,000, essentially, free barrels of oil that flow daily, Ezra, daily, from Venezuela to Cuba. As bad as things get in Venezuela, look, the people are going in the streets, they can't find this, but those 100,000 barrels are still going from Venezuela. All that wealth is still flowing from Venezuela to their colonial masters in Cuba. And now, the people responsible for the murders, you might call them death demonstration, but they were shot. Now, Maduro will say, well, those weren't really government troops or government police. And in fact, they really weren't. They weren't wearing government uniforms, but they are the Maduro's government's stormtroopers. They are called colectivos, collectives. Essentially, they perform for Maduro what the SA, Gregor Strasser's and Ernst Röhm's SA performed for Hitler prior to him taking power. Of course, after Hitler took power, their usefulness was gone, so he did away with them in the Night of the Long Knives. But these stormtroopers, the colectivos, are still very, very useful to the Maduro government. They were trained, by the way, and indoctrinated in Cuba. Now, these are the people responsible for the murders going on in Venezuela right now.
Now, the situation in Ukraine, it has some similarity. Russia is trying to bring Ukraine back into its orbit. There's an economic aspect there. Russia demands a lot of money from Ukraine in overpriced gas sold from Gazprom. I see a similarity. Here's the difference. The world is focused on Euromaidan and what's going on in Kiev, but I don't think this Venezuelan story has received a lot of publicity. How has the United States Secretary of State. Has he said anything about this? Has the United States made any comment, or is he pulling another Obama, being quiet in the face of tyranny?
As we go to press, I haven't heard anything from him, but I don't think. But the thing is, it's exciting in a way because I think this may be the tipping point. But it's tragic because people are dying. But you know, without a few people dying, and I hate to say this, I don't know, so you may never get rid of that Venezuelan regime. It is essentially an appendage of the Cuban regime. Everything they do is under the tutelage. Look, if you listen to the media, they'll say, oh, well, Castro sends doctors and teachers to Cuba to repay him for all that oil. Folks, fewer doctors and some are teachers, but what are they teaching? Most of them are security advisors. Castro's KGB-trained secret police essentially runs the Venezuelan government's security service. Venezuela's Ministry of the Interior, the important stuff, the secret police is run lock, stock, and barrel from Havana. Maduro's own bodyguards are Cubans.
No wonder he won't speak out against Castro and stop the massive transfer of wealth. Umberto, we're out of time today. I'm glad we shone a light of public scrutiny on this story. I think it has been an underreported story, and I think it's time that if not the United States government, at least Canada should stand up for the people of Venezuela against their authoritarian bullies. Great to see you, Umberto. Stay in touch with us, okay?
Thanks.